हेलो फ्रेंड्स, केजी क्लासेस में आपका स्वागत है। आज हम आपको फ्रांसिस बेकन के लॉन्ग क्वेश्चन आंसर के बारे में बताएंगे। क्वेश्चन थर्ड, एग्जामाइन बेकन्स कैरेक्टर एंड पर्सनालिटी ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ हिज एसेस यू हैव रीड, और एवेल्युएट पॉप्स assessment of Bacon as the wisest, brightest, meanest of mankind. Answer heading है Introduction. Bacon possessed a dual personality. He was a mental giant but a moral dwarf. According to W. J. Long in Bacon, B.C., one of those complex and contradictory natures which are the despair of the biographer. Further, the same critics add Bacon was apparently one of those double natures that only God is competent to judge, because of the strange mixture of intellectual strength and moral weakness that is in them. Critics have given their views on both the sides of the character of Bacon, whereas Ben Jonson has praised Bacon's power and ability. Hallam has condemned him as a man who, being entrusted with the highest gift of heaven, habitually abused them for the poorest purposes on earth, hired them out for Guinness, places, and titles in the service of injustice, covetousness, and Operation Pop. The great 18th century poet also had these two opposing aspects of Bacon's personality when he wrote these lines. If farce allure thee, think how Bacon signed the wisest, brightest, meanest of mankind. Macaulay thought Bacon to be the supreme example of shining intellect confined to a base and object moral nature. Arthur Campton Rickett observes he had a great brain, not a great soul. He was not great enough to resist temptation. He was both too great and too little to succeed in life. Sainsbury also remarks about his character. He had in him an eminent degree of all the bad qualities of Renaissance politicians except debauchery and perhaps vindictiveness. He was greedy, ostentatious, and mean, a born intriguer. Heading है the wisest and the brightest. According to Pope, Bacon was the wisest and the brightest person. Pope's assessment of Bacon is just and judicious. Bacon was really a very brilliant and knowledgeable man. He made knowledge his province. His first object was to acquire knowledge which increases man's empire over the earth. At the age of 30, he wrote to Vulgi, I have as vast contemplative ends as I have moderate civil ends, for I have taken all knowledge to be my province. The fertility of Bacon's mind was amazing according to Scamp. Bacon stands second in intellectual power only to Shakespeare. He was a man of towering intellect. It is impossible to study even the outlines of his subject, which cover almost every aspect of life. He worked endlessly to penetrate the secrets of nature, fathered the inductive method of philosophy, and thus paved the way for the emergence of modern science. He revolutionized the entire concept of scientific achievement and research. Bush observes he not only summoned men to research, he brought the Cinderella of science out of her partial obscurity and enthroned her as the queen of the world. Bacon's head was always buzzing with huge schemes: the pacification of unhappy Ireland, the simplification of English law, the reform of the church, the establishment of a new philosophy, and the utopia and ideal state. Francis Bacon was an eloquent orator. He had an amazing command of language which he could use profusely to serve his own purposes. Speaking of his power of eloquence and ability, Ben Jonson says, "No man ever spoke more neatly, more brightly, or suffered less emptiness, less idleness in what he uttered. His hearers could not cough or look aside from him without loss. He commanded where he spoke, and had his judge angry and pleased at his direction. No man had their affections more in his power. The fear of every man that heard him was that he should make an end. In the field of literature, his achievements are marvelous, not only in the field of science and philosophy, but in his field also he attained great brilliance. He is undisputedly known as the father of the English essay. No doubt he borrowed the form from the French writer Montaigne, but he filled it with the matter of his own brain. The full volume of his work may be read through from page to page in an evening, but after one has read them a dozen times, one still finds as many places to pause and reflect as at the first reading. His style is equally marvelous. It is terse, pithy, and packed with thoughts. In an age that used endless circumlocutions, he created a new style of writing, the modern style, on account of which he may very well be called the father of modern English prose. Bacon had a versatile genius and a universality of thought. His observations are minute and accurate, and his essays cover a wide variety of subjects concerning the life of man. His prose has influenced a number of writers from his own days to the modern times. Heading है the meanness of his character. Bacon is also considered as the meanest of mankind. Macaulay took him to be an example of shining intellect joined to a base and object moral character. According to Dr. Abbott, Bacon was intended to be a prophet of science, a mouthpiece of the discoveries of time, but fate diverted him to the petty detail of a lawyer's, of a courtier's, or a statesman's life. Lytton Strachey goes to the extent of calling him a snake in the grass. Let us see some of the aspects of the meanness of his character. Bacon was highly opportunist. He was actuated in his life by a strong will to power, and in order to get worldly advancement and wealth, he could bend to most slavish behavior, servile cunning, flattery, and treachery. He did not hesitate to change his principles and attributes according to the dictates of the moment. He believed in the parliamentary form of government and advocated increased power for the parliament. But when James first came to the throne, in order to please him, he strongly advocated his theory of the divine rights of the king. He changed sides and became a true monarchist. Personal aggrandizement came uppermost with him. Bacon was raised to the highest position in the land, but even then, ignoring his high status, He could bend to the acceptance of the pettiest sums as bribes. He was fond of an ostentatious style of living, kept a large number of servants, and was lavish in matters of food and dress. Consequently, he was always in need of money, for which he adopted highly corrupt and questionable means to increase his income. In his New Atlantis, he warns public servants against accepting presents from the people, but he himself did not hesitate in accepting presents from others. He even borrowed money from suitors, although he spoke against this practice in his essay of Suitors. Hudson remarks that Bacon sacrificed his character for the sake of wealth and power and for the satisfaction of his worldly ambition. His morals were of the narrowest expediency and utilitarianism. Bacon also lacked humanity. His intellectuality left him emotionally stunned. His commanding intellect and a rich imagination stand out as two prominent personality traits from his essays, but they were conjoined with a strange incapability for emotion or moral earnestness. He used love, cold governing mind. His essays on love, friendship, and marriage reveal his cold-bloodedness. He regarded wife and children as hostage to fortune. His marriage was a marriage of convenience and not of love. Love for him was a child of folly, and a friend was valued by him only for utilitarian reasons. He projected two of his friends, Essex and Somerset, with great zeal. He considered only the practical advantage of friendship, not its spiritual aspects. Heading a defense for Bacon. Some critics have tried to defend Bacon from the charges mentioned above about his character. For example, Spedding has suggested that Bacon's faults were the fault of the age. He was merely a child of the age. He was an age in which power was concentrated in the hands of a few. Intrigue and opportunist by the order of the day. Friendship were violated and sided were changed as one's interests demanded. Even the greatest of the land accepted bribes. Living in such an age, Bacon did what others were doing and what he realized was necessary for success. On the other hand, he was a great intellectual. He had an intense thirst for knowledge. What he thought power was unnecessary to acquire knowledge. He therefore sacrificed his deals to achieve the aims dear to him. In the words of Selby, profoundly religious at heart and filled with high principles of morality, he had yet to adapt himself to the condition of a selfish and intriguing world, and to study and practice the arts by which success in life was to be won. We may believe in what Bacon said to himself: "My soul hath been a stranger in the course of my pilgrimage." Heading a summing up. The various faults of Bacon should not divert our attention from his real greatness as revealed in his various writings. We may sum up the whole thing about the character and achievement of Bacon in the words of Campton Rickett. Regarding his work as a whole, we may say that best summing up is expressed in his own words: "A bell ringer who is up first to call others to church." In his advancement of learning, he is one of the earliest to seek to consolidated and unify his knowledge. In his essay, he is the pioneer of a clear sensuous sententious English that suggests rather than expound and blends dignity with familiarity in that pleasing and attractive manner which is the secret of the few of the great essayists. Again, in his Henry VII, he shows the possibility of a flowing, orderly, and picturesque narrative that shall compel attention without recourse to strained conceit. Finally, in his New Atlantis, with its plea for college of scientific research, he started a movement that led to the foundation of the Royal Society. Despite the marks of philosophy with which it is customary to adorn Bacon, it may be questioned whether he will be seriously adjudged as a great thinker. Here again, he is the bell ringer to thought rather than the profound reasoners. His literary method is that of the orator, not the dialectician. He is not good in argument nor not reliable even in exposition. He saw the value of scientific precision and the careful accumulation of facts, but his own cast of mind was not adapted to the carrying out of his own admirable precept. In fact, he is a valuable intellectual irritant rather than a constructive force, an intellectual irritant with fine, rich literary resources at his command, fertile in illustration, luminous in suggestion, and with considerable power to challenge and arrest the attention. Thanks, best of luck.